Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly chat by Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. We're going to be talking Steelers fan nihilism. Jason, we do read the comments. We've been paying attention to a lot of them saying nothing really matters in this offseason unless they get rid of Tomlin, unless they get rid of Art Rooney II. So Jason and I are going to get into some conversation about that, what can be done short of a playoff win to mollify some of those feelings that people are having. We're also going to talk about the Penguins' free fall since the break, the Four Nations face-off break. It's been pretty ugly, Jason, so we're going to dig into that. Then in the third segment, airing on our Post-Gazette, our new Post-Gazette Pirates channel, we're going to talk about Anthony Rizzo. Why aren't the Pirates approaching him given their need at first base? So you can check that segment out over on that channel. Please subscribe over there. Jason, let's just get into it with this Steelers fan nihilism that I mentioned at the top of the show. It's pretty much what I said. Every video we do on any topic for any purpose, I get those types of comments just basically saying, why are we paying attention to this offseason if Mike Tomlin is still here? And it doesn't seem to matter, whether they could do some good things in this offseason. People think as long as the coach is the same, that you're going to have a problem. First of all, just let me get your thoughts on that overall, and then I have some questions coming off of that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it a lot too. I get it via email. We get it comments and stories, even Twitter reactions, that sort of thing. And I understand it. I mean, in the NFL, and especially somebody who has as much power as Mike Tomlin does, they're culpable. He should be blamed. I'm not absolving Mike Tomlin of anything. I do find it fascinating, though, and we were texting about this a little bit. It's almost like it's the easiest spot to redirect vitriol. Like you could just say, it doesn't matter because the head coach. Yes, it does. It does matter. They were 10-3 with the same head coach. They have done some good things with the same head coach. Does that make him perfect? No. Does that make him stubborn? Yes. Like, I don't understand it. Hopefully we get to a point where we can kind of put our finger on it. I'm not sure if we will. I think it also has to do with just Tomlin being here, and I think having an ego, having some impact in the defense, maybe having too much impact on the defense, not having a coaching tree. Like, it's a fascinating situation that I think you look at Mike Tomlin, you're like, wow, this dude really controls a room. And I think that's a good thing, and I think it can maybe be a bad thing if that room does not have a great tenor to it, which I would argue the Steelers don't right now.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here, Jason, is the difference between skepticism, which I find healthy, and there should be skepticism, accountability, all of that after the collapse that they had down the stretch, and the nihilism that I more attribute to the Pirates. And I am somewhat in that nihilist about the Pirates because we have decades of reasons why. We have that.
And do you think the Steelers are mounting? Or the Steelers coming along there, Adam? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't, because I see a franchise that does not behave like the Pirates. You have the Pirates go through an offseason where they sign, some guys off the scrap heap, but otherwise don't do much to improve a 76-win team, a team that's not close to the playoffs.
Yeah.
When fans talk like that about the Pirates, I say I get it. And it's not just a one-off season. It's my whole life practically. And then when I look at the Steelers, as recently as last offseason, I remember lots of people in the same comment section telling us we were being too negative about Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or some of these big swings that they took in free agency in the draft. A lot of people, last spring were feeling really good about where this franchise was. And I think part of this too, Jason, is this franchise is still paying the price for mistakes that it made years ago. I look at the Kenny Pickett pick. To some extent, I look at the Najee Harris pick of the things you passed on to bring in a running back who has not really popped here. They made a lot of mistakes late in that Kevin Colbert era. They went for broke trying to win with Ben Roethlisberger, and they are still paying the price for some of that to some extent. And this roster is not deep enough. And so I think that there's been enough good things in the last 2 years that you can still feel positive about the direction, even if the results aren't where they should be or where people think.
Why should you feel positive about the direction, Adam?
I think they've generally made good, savvy moves with and done well with what they represent.
They're 10-7, they're 9-8. They're 10-7, they're 9-8. Their direction is comfortable in the middle. Their direction is being satisfied with not having a losing season, but also not really threatening anybody. And that's the thread. That's the epitome of what Mike Tomlin has been about. I mean, that's why I think Mike Tomlin irritates people, because he's probably shooting higher. I don't think Mike Tomlin, reports for work the first day of a season, the first day of a new league year, and said, man, I can't wait to go 10-7. But they make decisions that embrace comfortability. He doesn't change things. He doesn't react to things. He's been there a long time. He doesn't play a game, gameplay style. You want to not turn it over. You don't want to take too many chances. Like that breeds, that is safe. That is overly safe. Even the types of plays they run, they're overly safe. And I think fans on the outside see things and they get so mad. And this is what I was saying before. Like, it just becomes an easy target for vitriol, which some of it is understandable, but some of it is almost just we're conditioned to get mad at Mike Tomlin. But I think he's the personification of just this safety approach for the Steelers. And I don't feel better about their direction. I really don't.
Well, I'd say this, Jason. I feel good about their drafts. I think they've drafted better than they have the last couple of years. And the problem is that they didn't draft well before that. They drafted that Chase Claypool draft. Almost no one is left from that one. Yeah. The Kenny Pickett pick was obviously a huge disaster. And when you miss on those first round picks, it really damages your depth. And I think if you stack a couple more drafts like this, Jason, there's more talent on the team. And I think they have an ability to go past that 10-7, that, not mediocre. Mediocre is to me like, a 500 record or, 8-9 now in the modern NFL. I think they're a little bit above that talent wise, but I see your point as well. Let me ask you this, Jason. What do you think they can do, Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, in this offseason to stem any of this vitriol that is circulating? Is there a draft pick they can make? Is there a trade or signing that they can make realistically that's going to get people, maybe not all the way onto their bandwagon and saying, man, we love Mike Tomlin, we love Omar Khan, we've forgotten everything that went wrong, but at least gets them to a point where they're not actively furious in the comments of every Steelers video we do?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I don't think they're too far off from it, Adam. I think it's very much attainable. I think we're seeing that some at the NFL Combine and in the draft. I mean, let's sketch this draft plan out. Tell me if this is far-fetched. I don't think it is. Let's say they go defensive line in the first round. Get one of the big dudes from Michigan. I'm just spitballing. Let's say in the second round, they get a fairly high-end wide receiver. Let's say they get a running back in the middle round. Maybe the third round or something, they get a cornerback. Just, again, rough sketch. In free agency, they go out and pay a wide receiver, like a legit, 1-2 guy opposite George Pickens. You don't question that. Maybe they even sign another back in free agency just to kind of have some depth. Is anybody going to be all that mad about that sort of offseason? Now, the big question mark, of course, is quarterback. But I think if you surround the Steelers with enough weapons, I don't think fans are going to get that mad if it's one of the two guys they seem to prefer. I do think it's going to be Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I wrote earlier this week, I don't understand why Fields would come back here. To me, Russ seems like the more logical option. I'm less excited about it. I just think there's more of a desire to get things done early. But either one of those guys, if you surround them, you ask me what those guys can do to restore confidence. Yeah, I do think executing on those plans and getting players that, you're not a reach. It's not somebody we don't hear about. There's not a super big gamble. I'd like to see them not take a chance on character, a la George Pickens, and Mike Tomlin think that he can sort of corral that. I'd like to see them get really high-end character guys, but, there are a bunch of positions of need here that in the next few weeks, the next 2 months, let's say, really going to be fascinating to see how they fill them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there seems to be a willingness because you have a lot of cap space this year. Yeah. The question is how much is left after you resolve that quarterback situation. Maybe it's not as much as some people are hoping.
Not Jason, after they signed Matthew Stafford for $50 million.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's all gone in one fell swoop there. But it does not sound like that's what they want. It sounds like they want to spread the dollars out a little bit. Just listening to Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldo, our Steelers insiders, reading some of those tea leaves. Jason, let me ask you this. To what degree do you think the way they're losing playoff games is part of the reason for this nihilism, the skepticism that we're talking about? Because I think of a playoff game like the one Baltimore lost to Buffalo. And I'm thinking if Steelers fans see more of those types of playoff games, maybe this playoff drought is not talked about in the same way, where you're competitive with some of the best teams in the AFC, competitive with some of the best teams in the NFL. If you look solid in that Christmas Day game, that big showcase against Kansas City, if you play better against the Eagles and don't have the second half that they had in Philadelphia, is it the way it looks for a lot of people, you think?
I think it gets better. I don't think anybody's going to be happy about losing as many games in the playoffs as they do. You know, when you talk about the standard being the standard and competing in the postseason and all that stuff, I mean, if you lost all of those games by 3 points, like, I think there would still be talk of a trend. But yeah, it certainly accentuates it when they're getting their doors blown off. I think, you know, the question with the Steelers is, you know, they probably view themselves as one of the upper crust teams in the NFL, or at least they did. They're not, and they shouldn't. And I think the fan base probably sees that and sees, you know, there's just this giant gulf of space that is how many times they've been crushed in the playoffs. Like, that's how far away from the best teams in the AFC we are. And we want to see the organization take steps to, you know, match our frustration. We want to see, like, this, we're this far away. We want to see that reflected in moves. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of the same old. The fact that it's lopsided, it was a problem to begin with, but those two things definitely make it worse.
To what extent do you think the general malaise of Pittsburgh sports, I know you've talked about that a little bit on some of your Saturday's Conversations podcast with some of your various guests, but you know, the fact that the Pirates and the Penguins are not in vastly dissimilar places, do you think people are it's like ping pong balls, or do you remember those little like bowl things that you'd put a penny in at Giant Eagle? And you'd put several pennies in, and sometimes the pennies would run into each other and fall into the slot at the bottom. That's how it feels.
What the thing where you like roll the pennies around?
Yeah, it was like a big like bowl type thing, and you drop the penny in, and it would go around and around and around. So
yeah. I got you now.
Yeah, and if you put too many pennies in, they'd run into each other and they'd go straight down. That feels like where we are with the Steelers and the Pirates and the Penguins is. All of the fury is running around in this bowl, and sometimes it runs into each other, and people get just furious. You know, partly because they have no like outlet for positive emotion with this city right now.
Well, they have Robert Morris men's basketball.
That is true.
But pour it out there, man. Yeah, I mean, I can't say it's not part of it, right? This is terrible right now, Adam. What happened the other night? The Penguins lost 6-1 to the Flyers. Pitt basketball loses. The Steelers have this study released where, you know, they get crushed by the NFL Players Association. And that's just one night. It happens all the time around here. So, yeah, I don't doubt it. But, I mean, even if the Pirates and Penguins were winning, I still think the frustration would exist with Tomlin. I think it would exist with the Steelers. I don't think it's wrong. I understand why people think the way they do. I mean, it's obstinance is what it is. And it's a refusal to do things differently. And I think that just at its core ticks people off. Like even something as simple as clock management, having a coach, you know, to handle game situations. And they're steadfast that they don't need that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And anybody watching this game at home can realize, like the guy Blomqvist can't jump off his couch and go down to Acrisure Stadium and manage the final 2 minutes of a half. That's not what I'm saying. But you see that they need help and they resist getting help. You see some of these players are an attitude problem and they're not doing anything about the attitude problem. And so there's obvious things that I don't think the Steelers are addressing in a way that resonates with their fans. It's happening over and over again. You're seeing the results proof positive in the playoffs when they get crushed. And so it's just continuing to build. And I don't know, man, maybe these next 2 months will be, you know, this magic tour de force for Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, and people will kind of chill and put the pitchforks down. But I don't know about you. This is as nasty, frustrated as I've seen the fan base, Steelers fan base specifically, here in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the closest, you know, allegory I can draw is to those Bill Cowher losing seasons that came several in a row. I was a kid then, so I didn't fully, you know, have a grasp of it in the same way I do now. But I certainly remember the vitriol. I certainly remember spending hours watching the post-game shows on KDK and such, and the call after call of just furious people. Yeah, we're close to that right now. Speaking of fury, we're going to talk about the Penguins. possibly in a worse situation here on the other side of this break. Before we do, I just want to thank a couple of sponsors. This show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Also want to thank our friends down in Bradenton, Florida.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
We are back on our weekly chat. Adam Bittner, Jason Mackey, talking Pittsburgh Penguins, who 3 games out of the Four Nations face-off break have gotten their doors blown off. Jason, worst one was earlier this week against the Flyers in Philadelphia. They'll run it back on Thursday night, look for redemption there, but it was 6-1 loss. It was ugly from all perspectives. Jason, here's my question, kind of in the big picture. What's the biggest problem with this franchise relative to expectations? Because I don't think a lot of us went into the season expecting much, but I think you expected more than being embarrassed the way you have been coming out of this break. So what is the biggest problem relative to what you expected from this franchise?
That's a tough one, because recency bias would tell me effort. Recency bias would tell me you want to see more compete. You want to see more toughness. And that's what ticked me off so much about that Flyers loss. I mean, that just shouldn't happen. I'm not saying you should win games. Obviously, they're not as good of a team as some other teams in the East, although they should be better than the Flyers. That effort was just porous. I think if you look big picture, though, Adam, probably the biggest part relative to expectations is probably just the lack of solutions. I was reading through some of Kyle Dubas's past comments this morning for a Sunday column I'm working on about the second half or the remaining part of this season, what can be gleaned for it. And one of the things Kyle Dubas was asked about, I think this was either at the beginning of the year or the end of last one, like how would you deem success? And he said success would be in the mix late in the season, March and April, and also seeing individual players and individual things get better. And so I think that's probably the frustrating part or what doesn't square with me relative to expectations. I don't know what all has gotten better. They're certainly not in the mix. What has improved? If you look at goaltending, it has been decidedly worse. And it's a giant problem because you have $5.375 million committed to Tristan Jarry. And I don't know how you get out of it. Joel Blomqvist has come up and has not been ready. I don't know where else you go at this point. Maybe young players. We've seen Owen Pickering come up and do something. It's been okay. Depth scoring, no. Erik Karlsson getting $10 million a year, no. Sidney Crosby relative to expectations, sure. Rickard Rakell, Brian Rust when healthy, absolutely. But the power play, even early in the season, it was a bit of a strength for the Penguins. It's been terrible of late. So I just think there are areas, parts of the game, players, all this stuff attached to the Penguins that you would like to see progress. And I don't think they've made nearly enough of it, which is probably an obvious statement.
I think there's a lot of people, Jason, that don't seem to expect progress from this franchise, just given the state or given the age of the core with Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, Kris Letang. I think there's, especially in the casual fan base, I think this is less a problem with the people who are watching the games every night, who know every player, who have studied the game. But I think there's a big chunk of the casual fan base that looks and says, well, those guys are getting old. This was inevitable.
Yeah.
There is nothing that could have been done to salvage this situation. But I look at it and say those 3 core guys are making less relative to the salary cap than they ever have. Yeah. And I don't see them as the problem here, Jason. It's the surrounding pieces and, a sequence of mistakes that have led them here. Am I wrong to believe that it should be better than this? I'm not saying should they still be cup contenders, but they should at least be competing for a playoff spot. And if the cards fall right, the matchup falls right, maybe you can have 2 fun weeks around here and maybe win a playoff series. I think that's still a fair expectation of this franchise relative to what you're getting from the core.
You're not wrong at all, Adam. You're not wrong at all. And honestly, it's on Kyle Dubas. If you think about this number right now, $20 million. That's basically how much they have tied up in Erik Karlsson, Ryan Graves, and Tristan Jarry. Those are all moves that Kyle made, and they've all backfired. Imagine if the Penguins had a free $20 million to spend on actual things, like on a goaltender that wasn't in the AHL, a defenseman who wasn't in the press box, a defenseman who was actually interested in playing a team game. I'd even take somebody making the league minimum who just defended in front of the net and hit somebody. I don't need any points. Just play a safe game. I think that's probably a better bet than Karlsson at this point. And those are moves made by Dubas. So anyway, the point is, can the Penguins be good enough? Can they be better than they are? And I absolutely believe that. They have a very good top line. Even Michael Bunting has been a good second line winger for $3 million and change. I'm fine with that. They've taken some chances on some guys. They haven't been altogether terrible. If you're going to rotate that spot with Danton Heinen, Philip Tomasino, Cody Glass, I'd prefer to have an upgrade there, but it's good enough. They haven't gotten enough depth scoring. They've never solved their third line center problems. Lars Eller has been that for a little bit, but obviously they traded him long ago. There's not enough length to the lineup. And a lot of that is on Kyle Dubas. He's had the opportunity to make moves. They've also had the opportunity to bring up some prospects, and they haven't brought them along. Like Sam Poulin was a first-round pick, not by Kyle, by Ron Hextall. But where's the impact there? Where are other guys who have produced at the American Hockey League level, getting them to produce at the NHL level? It hasn't happened. And if you look at the Penguins' previous cup teams, their previous run of success, they've had guys doing that on entry-level deals. And the fact that they're not doing it now, it kind of leads to the stale product where you're having the Matt Nietos of the world or Nola Charis or, these kind of just plugger-type guys eat up minutes and not really do much with them.
Yeah, and I think, some people will argue that, you can't do that if you didn't pick high in the first round. The NHL draft is such a dart throw once you get out of the top 5, sometimes top 10 picks.
Yeah.
To which I'd say, sure, yes, you can't rely on any one first-round pick in the 20s to save the franchise. But over a period of years, you should be able to develop a few guys who beat some expectations, come to the NHL. I would put a lot of those guys you mentioned in that cup run, those cup runs that came up to this roster in that category of I don't know that we were sitting around saying, is Brian Rust going to be the guy, the finishing piece to a Stanley Cup team? I don't think that's how we were talking about him or Jake Gensel or a lot of these guys who came up at that time, and they just do not have that next wave of guys behind them.
No, and they might. They have some guys down there. I don't want to be, altogether throw a whole bunch of water on the Ville Koivunens or Vasily Ponomarovs or even Rutger McGroarty, Tristan Bros, whatever. I like some of what they have, and I'm just talking specifically forwards right now. They have some guys there. Can they translate those skills to the NHL? I don't know. That's what I'm looking for of the final 20 games or so after we get through this weekend, and even next season, how they're going to be able to – because the interesting thing with Kyle Dubas and the Penguins right now, Adam, they're going to have some cap space. They're going to have some cap space for next year. It's going to go up. They can retool this faster if they want to. And I also don't think they're really going to have an opportunity to do a ton at the deadline just because of no movement clauses and, probably trying to keep Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust around because they help the Penguins, I think, more than they would via trade. So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying that, they need these young guys to come up and contribute now. The ship has not sailed, and it needs to happen in 25, 26.
You set up my next question well, Jason, because you said, no movement clauses, probably can't do much at the deadline. But why would that change in the offseason? I think that's my big question. Why would, if they have any thought of moving Evgeni Malkin, of moving Kris Letang, of, probably in a very distant reality, moving Sidney Crosby, why is that a conversation you can't have in season? And why is that something we have to wait until the summer to do?
Well, a couple things. One, if you would want to move Brian Rust, he has a no movement clause that expires after this season. So just functionally, you have more freedom there. And again, I don't know if it makes sense. That's just reality. And two, I think you probably sit down at the end of this thing, retool, think about your vision, and have conversations with Kris and Evgeni and say, look, this is our projection. This is where we think we're going to be. I don't think we're going to compete for anything in 2 or 3 years. This is the window we're targeting. This is what we're trying to do. I understand you wanting to stay here. We can also trade you and you can be in a more competitive situation the next 2 or 3 years. The three of you guys should talk, figure out what you want to do, and get back to us. And I mean, that's kind of where the Penguins are left right now, right? Like, I wish it was rosier, but they need to figure out what they want. And I mean, the big three. I mean, Sid can have this. I don't think it's the best thing for the Penguins to have that much money tied up in Evgeni Malkin and Kris Letang. So if Sid wants to compete sooner, they should probably go their separate ways. If Letang and Malkin want to compete for anything and not be stuck in a rebuild, they should probably waive the no movement clauses and go somewhere else. I don't know where that is, but I mean, you could still make those moves. I just think they require deeper conversations and deeper thought than a lot of times hockey people are able or willing to give in the season.
Yeah, that's fair, Jason. I think it's just a natural question that a lot of people have. I'll get you out of here on this. To what extent do you think we are heading for, and I know the financial situation is different. It's not a team skating at the edge of bankruptcy, pun intended, I guess. But I think in 2002, 2003, when you started selling off Jágr, Kovalev, those cores of that 01 team that got to the Eastern Conference Championship, but Mario stayed, and he skated around with, the X generation and then the X Force guys, if you remember those marketing campaigns.
Yeah.
How far are we for that? And how many of those, I think it's possible you could still be in that situation next season, even if all three of those guys want to come back and want to end their career in, one jersey and playing together, but the franchise is moving on from them, even as they're still on the team.
I think we're there. Adam. Yeah. And I agree with you. Whether or not Kris Letang and Evgeni Malkin waive their no movement clauses, I think we're there. I look at where the Penguins are at and kind of the way it sketches out in the draft the next 3 years. I think Kyle Dubas has 29 picks the next 3 drafts. There's like 15 in the top 3 rounds. I mean, that's going to be the emphasis. Now, can he get it done faster? Yeah, I think he maybe can, because if you remember the X generation, like, there wasn't a salary cap. Teams could spend. The Penguins just didn't have it to spend. I think FSG is much more insulated or better insulated to absorb something like that. The cap's going up. You can spend. That's regulated. So yeah, I don't think we're looking at 3 seasons where I can guarantee they're going to stink. No, and they still have some pieces in place. And honestly, the truth of the matter with the Penguins, Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, and Kris Letang haven't been their biggest problems. It's been everything else. Like, if those, and I think you said that earlier in the podcast, Adam, like, if they can support those guys with talented players, faster players, it can still work. So I don't know if that's going to happen immediately. I think we're probably looking at a middle ground between, like, get back and contend in 25, 26, the X generation. We're somewhere in the middle, which, hey, that's perfect for Pittsburgh sports right now, right?
A positive note to end the Penguins portion of the podcast here. Jason, we're going to come back and talk Pirates. We're going to be over on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Pirates channel, so make sure you subscribe over there to check out the third segment. If you're on audio, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on here. It's all going to be one show, but we want to put the Pirates video in front of the Pirates audience, so check us out over there. We'll be right back.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.